Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So, today I'm going to continue my Black History Month series, and I'm going to talk about the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad. So, the Nation of Islam was founded on July 4th, 1930, by Farad Muhammad. Farad Muhammad, according to some reports, at one point was a member of the Moorish Science Temple, an organization led by Noble Drew Ali. Farad Muhammad would go on to found his own organization, the Nation of Islam, again in 1930. One of his students, Elijah Muhammad, would go on to lead the organization in 1934. At that time, Farad Muhammad disappeared. Now, I'm going to briefly talk about the ideology of the Nation of Islam and the theology of the Nation of Islam. So, the Nation of Islam believes in black separatism. They believe that black people, instead of trying to integrate in this society, instead of trying to fight for equal rights in this society, they believe that black people need to separate from America and create their own nation. Also, in terms of their theology, they don't believe in what they call a mystery God. They believe that the black man is God, and they believe that God came in the person of Farad Muhammad. They also don't believe that the devil has horns and a tail and all that kind of stuff. They believe that the devil is the white man. They believe that the white man was grafted from the black man, the original man, and that the white man is inherently weaker and wicked and devilish, and that the white man is in fact the devil. That's what the Nation of Islam believes. So I'm going to talk about the positive aspects of the Nation of Islam. And before I do that, I just want to say briefly that the Nation of Islam's beliefs are contrary to mainstream Islam, and I'm going to go into that later on in this video. But in terms of the positive aspects of the Nation of Islam, they instilled a sense of pride in the black community. Instead of black people believing in the myth of white supremacy, they taught black people to have self-respect. They taught black people to have pride in themselves. They taught black people, instead of being dependent, that black people should be independent. They taught a doctrine of nationalism. They taught that black people should do for self instead of asking the government to do for them. So the Nation of Islam did not just talk about doing for self. They did not just talk about building like many groups today. The Nation of Islam actually built. They built organizations, institutions in their community, and they continue to do so today. So, for instance, the Nation of Islam did not talk about reforming the public school system. Instead, they created their own schools. At one point, they had schools in 47 cities in the United States. They built their own businesses. They had coffee shops. They had grocery stores. They had investment in banks. They had farmland. The Nation of Islam really made their word manifest. The Nation of Islam also created their own paramilitary unit called the Fruit of Islam. It was a security force and a paramilitary unit within the organization. So these were a group of disciplined black men who were trained in martial arts and self-defense, and they still have the FOI today under Farrakhan. So one of the great things about the nation, one of the things that I truly respect about the nation is how they were able to reform so many criminals in the black community, so many immoral people in the black community. They were able to clean them up. For instance, they were able to clean women up. And instead of them walking around half naked, the Nation of Islam taught them to be modest, taught them to wear beautiful garbs, to cover themselves and dress in a modest fashion, and carry themselves with pride and be great wives and mothers to their children. The Nation of Islam taught people to be pious to be righteous, to stay away from fornication and adultery and lying and, illegal behavior. So they taught people to be disciplined. They had classes for the women and for the men, and they still do today under Farrakhan. So the Nation of Islam was able to raise up people who were downtrodden and make them into great men and women. And there are great examples of what Elijah Muhammad was able to accomplish. And then you must bear in mind that Elijah Muhammad only had a third or fourth grade education, but yet he was able to accomplish this, able to build mosques all around the country. That is a tremendous accomplishment for somebody of his stature. He not only built institutions, he built men and women. He turned criminals like Malcolm Little into Malcolm X. Malcolm X went from being a drug dealer, a drug user, a pimp, a numbers runner, a burglar. He went from that to becoming one of the greatest leaders in the Black community of all times. One of the greatest leaders in the world, period. That's what the Nation of Islam was able to accomplish. They were able to get people off of drugs and clean them up. Elijah Muhammad was able to raise up a great Black leader like Farrakhan, great Black leaders like Khalid Muhammad, great Black people like Muhammad Ali. Not only was Muhammad Ali a great boxing champ, the brother was a great humanitarian. The brother embodied what it meant to be a strong, independent, proud Black man. That's what Elijah Muhammad was able to accomplish. That's what he was able to raise up. And although the Nation of Islam did not teach traditional Islam, because of the Nation of Islam, many African Americans were guided to traditional Islam as well. Many of us would not have even heard about Islam if it wasn't for Elijah Muhammad. There were no Arabs coming to the Black community to teach Black people about Islam. And the same is true today. Many of these communities, you have these Arabs in our community to get money from our community, but not to guide our communities, not to teach our communities about Islam. So if it wasn't for the Nation of Islam, many of us would not even know about Islam. Our only image of Islam would be the terrorist image that is presented on the news. But the Nation of Islam gave us something to be proud of. They were able to guide people into enlightenment. Also, the Nation of Islam, they were men and women of sacrifice. They didn't just talk the talk, they walked the walk. Elijah Muhammad didn't believe in serving in a white man's army. And he made his word his bond. And because of his commitment to his beliefs, that brother was imprisoned for 4 years for refusing to register for the draft during World War II. And later, one of his students, Muhammad Ali, would follow in his footsteps by refusing to be drafted for the Vietnam War. So these were men of principle, and they are men of principle. And for that, I respect the Nation of Islam. The public school system, they tried to crack down on the Nation of Islam when they tried to create their own schools. They tried to charge them with truancy because a lot of the kids would go to the Nation of Islam schools instead of the public schools. So I respect that aspect of the nation. Now what I'm going to do is talk about the areas of disagreement that I have with the nation. And the most significant one, a lot of them are significant, but one of the most significant differences or problems that I have with the nation is their interpretation of Islam. As I said before, they believe that a man is God, and that's probably one of the biggest controversies of their beliefs, because that is contrary to what Islam teaches as is interpreted around the world. So to illustrate that point, I'm just going to reference you all to Surah 112 in the Quran, and that surah is entitled Al-Ikhlas. And I'll begin to briefly recite that surah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Say, He is Allah, the One, Allah, the Eternal Absolute. He begetteth not, nor is He begotten, and there is none like unto Him. So that makes it clear, according to the Quran, that God is not a man. It says He begetteth not, nor is He begotten. That means that God wasn't born, nor does He give birth. He doesn't create through reproduction, nor is He reproduced. So no man can be God, just according to that definition.